Welcome to the Strategic Management Accounting course, where we teach the value-adding steps and processes necessary to execute strategy. Whether you are just starting up or looking to grow your business, then this course is for you. With your host, Dr. Neil O'Connor.
Hey, welcome back. You have got me, Neil O'Connor, and I'm taking you through Theory of Constraints, TOC. And some of you probably know the book, The Goal. Elian Goldratt wrote this story about the group of Boy Scouts and how that was an analogy of the push-pull factors and the balancing of different machines in the factory. Let's get into the good stuff about what theory of constraints is all about. And this is a lot about efficient capacity management. When you have a lot of different processes or activities, and where there is a bottleneck in one of those at any point in time because there's a little imbalance. And so let's get into the good stuff. This corresponds with Learning Objective 8, and where we want to apply three measures in the theory of constraints: throughput, contribution, investments, and operating costs. So let's have a look at what we mean by theory of constraints. How is it different from the use of the relevant cost concepts in determining the relevant information for pricing decision, for make or buy decisions? What we need to understand here is that some costs that are relevant costs under the traditional model of a longer period of 1 year or more do not cut it as terms of being relevant in the theory of constraints model, where we want to deal with this bottleneck this day, this week, this month. We need to deal with this bottleneck, and the only way to deal with it is to make decisions about: do we outsource? Do we put in a new machine? Do we do more maintenance? What do we have to do to iron out a bottleneck in the organization? The relevant information for the choice of how you might iron out a bottleneck is really just the direct material costs. So let's get into what we mean by this and how it's different from the relevant cost concepts. Let's get into some exercises about what theory of constraints is all about. So the theory of constraints describes some methods to maximize operating income when faced with some bottleneck and some non-bottleneck operations. Theory of constraints focuses on short-run time horizon and assumes that operating costs are fixed costs. Short run, this week, this month, okay? Really short run that we're focusing on. Throughput contribution equals revenues minus the direct material cost of goods sold. So this is a narrower definition of what is relevant and what is not relevant when you're making specific decisions under a theory of constraints. Again, we bring back our big strategic framework, and in the previous part we were focusing on decisions that are associated with managing customers' expectations, with time, what they expect to be waiting in the line with the bank. And down here we were trying to think about the capacity of the customer service officer in the bank. What do we mean by that? That is how fast the customer service officer can support the customer, can serve the customer, and really give the customer a really good customer experience, really good service experience. And so a customer service officer that is starting early on in the training may take longer, and then over time, over 1 year, 2 years, they get faster while being able to maintain a very friendly service to the customer. You know where everything is. And so while the last section focused on waiting time, it focused on comparing three different things that we don't always have total control over: customer demand, capacity to provide the service, which may be the capability of a customer service officer, and the waiting time. And so you might focus your decision strategy on one of these objects and say, okay, customers must not be kept waiting for longer than 5 minutes. So that's our decision constraint. We're constraining the waiting time. Now, if customers grow from 40 per day to 50 per day, now you need to balance that out with more capability at the service level. You need someone who can serve a customer in 4 minutes and not 5 minutes. You see that? And so those three parts are what we're trying to balance out when it comes to dealing with time, accounting for time constraints in that way. What we are doing now is going into more detail, operational detail in the factory, where we're looking for particular bottlenecks in a series of activities. The previous example really just focused on one big activity. That is, we could aggregate it in terms of the average time it takes to serve a customer. And there may be several processes in that, and there may be a bottleneck in that. And so we can unpack that. And that's where we are in this part. We are unpacking that activity, that capacity to provide a service, that capacity to provide production. We're unpacking that and trying to understand, can we actually iron out the bottlenecks so we have a smooth operation, a smooth delivery of the service, so we can do the service on average for every customer of 4 minutes per customer. Okay, so what we want to do in this section is actually unpack the bottleneck and look for different ways in which we can outsource, maintain the machines, put in a new machine, different ways in which we can deal with a particular bottleneck. You got it there? Right. So let's go into the good stuff, shall we? But in the end of the day, we are trading off. We are trying to manage expectations, and we're trying to provide capacity. At the end of the day, we may have to increase capacity, we may have to outsource, or we may have to do more marketing. Why? Marketing is all about managing expectations. Yes, you got that, all right. Or trying to re-represent missed expectations of prior poor service. Okay, so let's get into some example, and this is theory of constraints. We are unpacking the capacity of production, the capacity of the service here. And if we see that there are several processes in that capacity of providing a service or providing a production, we may find that one or two of those processes, there exists a bottleneck, and that slows down all the surrounding processes. So we use the analogy of a factory because it's easier to actually see the sequence of processes, but the same could exist in a service organization. In a bank, there may be various steps, and there may be one particular step that's holding up all the other steps. Same idea. So let's get into this example. Mayfield Corporation manufactures filing cabinets in two operations, machining and finishing. It provides the following information. So we have a production line here, all right? The filing cabinets, the machine, they are machined first, all right? So they are assembled, they're welded together, they're boxed together, they are pushed together, what have you. Then finishing. Maybe they're varnished if they're wooden. Maybe they got a coat of durable paint or something like that, so they'll last forever. You know, you got me there. So then we have finishing. So go machining and finishing. Now, no matter how many units that machining does beyond 80,000, the total throughput is going to be limited to the bottleneck of 80,000 units of the finishing department. So the machining makes 100,000. Well, 20,000 is just going to go to inventory, waiting for finishing to pick those 20,000 up and do those 20,000 the next day. But by the way, the next day there's another 100,000, so suddenly we're going to have 40,000. 60,000 the third day, 80,000 on the fourth day, and so on. You got the point here. So finishing here, this is where the bottleneck is. And so we want to look at different strategies or different solutions that we may point the finger at for trying to solve this bottleneck. Let's have a look at some more information. We have the fixed operating cost per unit produced of $8 per unit for machining, $5 per unit for finishing, but they are not relevant costs. What is relevant is the direct material costs of $32, and that's incurred at the start of the machining operation. Under theory of constraints, the only relevant costs are direct material costs, because we're looking at a very short period where we don't have variances in labor, we don't have variances in overhead, we don't have variances in selling costs, administration, and other activity-based costs that may vary with units of production. What we're looking at here is a bottleneck that exists in 1 week or 1 month, not in a longer period. So in the very shortest period possible, direct material costs are the only relevant costs. In this case, it's $32. So let's have a look at knowing that, how that is relevant to particular decisions that we may have to make. Here's the question to summarize where we're up to. Which operation is a bottleneck operation? You got it. It is finishing with 80,000 units. You got it. What is the throughput contribution per unit? Well, it's going to be the price minus the direct materials. Direct materials costs only. That's $40 per unit. So, first question. A new machine costs $30,000. It can increase throughput by 1,000 units. That means throughput through machining and finishing, both. Okay, not just through machining, but this will go all the way through finishing. Throughput means all the way through, not just halfway and then stop as inventory, all the way through. So what is the benefit? What is the cost? Should Mayfield acquire the machine? Everything else being equal, should Mayfield acquire the machine? That is the big question here. All right, what will be the increase in throughput contribution? We've got 1,000 extra units, and we can sell those 1,000 for 72 minus 32. There's the extra contribution. What is the cost of the machine, the jigs and the tools? $30,000. So what's the benefit? It's going to be $10,000. Should we do it? Everything else being equal, no other information, no other opportunity, making all these assumptions, we need to go ahead with this based on that information. Let's have a look at the next question. An outside contractor offers to do a finishing operation for 12,000 units at $10 per unit. Yay! It's double the $5 per unit that cost Mayfield to do the finishing in-house. You're probably thinking, if you're the finishing manager, you think, no way, we've got the cheapest finishing ever. All right, why on earth would we go outside and pay $10? We can do it for $5 here. No, but that's not the question, because at the end of the day, the objective function is to get more throughput, and you know that finishing department has only 80,000, because every unit that hits over that 80,000 drops down. Inventory, and the inventory starts stacking up. There's no throughput. Inventory is not throughput. It is waiting for finishing to get going the next day, because they only do 80,000. So here is a outside contractor that enables you to do finish operation, move from 80,000 up to 92,000. Okay, so the fact that you can do $5 per unit for that 80,000, that is irrelevant. That is irrelevant. What matters is that the extra 12,000, can we make money by pushing through an extra 12,000? That's all that matters. So let's have a look at the calculations. So increase in throughput contribution is $72 minus $32 direct materials, 480,000. You got that. Incremental contracting costs is $10 times 12,000. So we've got 120,000 here. So the net benefit of contracting out 12,000 units of finishing is $360,000. We must go ahead with that. This is a relevant cost because you are pushing through 12,000 more and only 8,000 is being pushed into inventory on every one day. So you got 8,000, 16,000, 24,000, 32,000 instead of 20,000, 40,000, 60,000, 80,000. That is the difference that this decision makes. So you must make this decision. It is a no-brainer. Let's have a look at another scenario here. Hunt Corporation offers to machine 4,000 units at $4 per unit, half the $8 per unit that costs Mayfield to do the machining in-house. Should Mayfield accept Hunt's offer? Show your calculation. Let's have a look at the objective function here. Remember, the objective function here is throughput, throughput, throughput. It is not just machining, 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 or finishing, finishing, finishing. It is machining, finishing, machining, finishing, machining, finishing. Its throughput is the objective function. Under theory of constraints, finishing is a bottleneck operation. So right now, you can say that I don't care whatever you offer to do more for the machine department. If it doesn't help the finishing department make one more unit, then don't do it. Not at all. It is not a good decision to go ahead with this. So look at the calculation. The operating costs in the machine department are $640,000. That's $8 per unit of fixed costs. Mayfield will not save any of these costs by subcontracting 4,000 units to Hunt Corporation, no matter how cheaper it is. The total cost will be greater by $16,000. That's $4 per unit times 4,000 units under the subcontracting alternative. Because the $8 per unit are fixed costs, they are not avoidable costs. They are not variable. They do not change in the future. So therefore, they are not relevant here. You are unable to avoid these costs. The only avoidable costs are the direct materials of the units that are made or are not made. Okay? So Mayfield should not accept Hunt's offer. The fact that Hunt's costs of machining per unit are half of what it costs Mayfield in-house is irrelevant. Machining more filing cabinets will not increase throughput, throughput, throughput. Machining, finishing, machining, finishing. It's got to go all the way through. It can't just stop at machining and pile up as inventory. That's the objective function here. With the theory of constraints, it's all about making decisions to optimize throughput. And that's through all of the activities, processes in the organization. So that's the big idea for theory of constraints. Direct materials are the only relevant costs, not direct labor, not variable overhead, not variable selling costs, not variable everything else, which may become relevant for short-run decision making. Here, we are making decisions to help iron out a bottleneck in some processes, in some operations, which is one of 3 decision points when we are competing on time. That is your capacity to provide the service or to provide the function. The other factor is the demand by the customer, which is really their expectations over how long it takes to deliver, the lead time, the delivery time, the waiting time, and finally there is time that we're competing on time. So if you set a service standard of time here and you can't back it up with extra capability, then you better try and manage the expectations of customers, because it's likely you're going to underperform according to their expectations. So keep in mind these 3 things: your capability to produce or provide the service, time, which is a certain service standard that you may promise or a certain lead time that you may promise, and the customer expectations, which is a customer demand. And so any of these 3 buttons, if you keep one of them tight and the other one changes, then you must change the other one. Okay, if your service standard doesn't change, demand goes up, then you must improve capability. And then you might unpack that capability to make it more efficient through this improvement function. Then we go into theory of constraints, and that's where we unpack the different processes or activities in this capability of providing a service or manufacturing a product. You're unpacking it, you're looking for a bottleneck, and then you're trying to make decisions about how to iron out that bottleneck. Do you need to throw more resources at it? Do you need to throw more training at it? And so forth. You with me? So we've got those three dials that we're playing with here. If your capability doesn't change and demand is going up, then you might have to dial down your expectations of your service standards. You might have to push out waiting time from 5 minutes to 8 minutes. You might have to push out lead time from 5 days to 8 days. You got my point here. So we've got 1, 2, 3. We've got three dials that we're playing with here. Keep that in mind. And that's the big takeaway when you're competing on time. So we'll catch you in the classroom. Thank you so much for watching. Just love you for your diligence in study, and catch you in the classroom. Bye for now.